My guest on this podcast is 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗀, an expert in co-living HMOs. We talk about what the difference is between the co-living and traditional HMOs and how they're commanding a premium rent, but also how they're taking commercial property and converting that straight into co-living space. And now, along with his partner, they're doing more than £10 million of those conversions. We also then touch on how this new government might be creating massive opportunities for us as landlords. So let's jump straight into the podcast.
First and foremost, you need an HMO specialist broker, as you said, that is doing HMO applications on a weekly basis. You need to understand how the valuation is instructed by the bank. So you need to understand what the bank's view, because the bank will tell you, or a BDM at a bank will tell you, yes, we can do that. And then when you go down the track, it gets harder and harder to hit what you originally thought you were going to get. I'm a big believer in doing deals that are not, because I said time is a healer. So if someone says to me, I want a 50% return annualized on my money, I say, right, okay, give me 10 years and I'll hit it.
Yes.
Yes. and give me 10 years and I'll exceed your expectations.
Yes. Matt is a former musician and a creative. You always work for yourself, and you've been in HMOs now for quite a few years. Now, I've seen some of your HMOs. They are literally on a next level compared to ours. So tell me a little bit about your HMOs. How are they different in terms of what most people are doing?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on, Saj. We do next level HMOs. That's kind of how we've coined them. And what we'd love to do is create amazing spaces for people to live in so that they love where they live.
Yes.
And it introduces the concept of co-living as a strategy rather than just a buzzword.
Yes.
And it means that we can create a space where people fall over themselves to rent it, they pay a premium for it, and they stay a long period of time. So it makes business sense, and it also makes human sense.
So what makes a HMO co-living? Because I hear the phrase, and I think, so what is co-living compared to a nice HMO? How's it different?
Well, an HMO, as most of your listeners will know, is the house. So I like to imagine it as the property itself, bricks and mortar. The house of multiple occupation, as defined by the Housing Act 2004, is the thing. Now that thing could be run down, could be social housing, could be young professionals, could be students. It's still an HMO.
Yes.
Whereas co-living starts when you have the community of people starting to form within that property.
Okay.
So when the occupants start to form meaningful relationships,
Yes.
you get this aura that happens around the property, which is the co-living element. So, and there's lots of things that we do to encourage the formation of meaningful relationships, which reduces the management challenges, because they're not coming to you because someone stole their cheese. They're resolving it amongst themselves. They're forming positive relationships so that they overcome the challenges themselves, and they, as I said before, they love where they live. So co-living is that community element that makes an HMO really sing.
Okay. And these are not students we're talking about?
Yes, you can do it within student properties. We've got clients that they specialise in students. They take rundown HMOs in Article 4 areas and they do them up and they make them really nice next level student accommodation. It's not something we do. I specialise in young professionals, so young working professionals between the ages of probably 23, 24 and 35. So they're not straight out of university, they're not straight out of school. We don't want to be pseudo mum and dad.
Yes.
They've learned how to live, they've had a few jobs, they've got some earning potential, and they move into one of our properties because we're more affordable than the rubbish flat down the road where they've got to pay all the bills on top. And then they stay for a long period of time.
Yes. So the creating of the community, I'm guessing there's some vetting in terms of who comes and who stays in the property, because when you got a little community feel like that going, I guess the dynamics can change very quickly when you introduce somebody different into that group. 100%.
We've definitely seen it on some of our earlier projects where we haven't designed them in the way to encourage co-living, whereby we've got a different tenant type. One bad apple can move in, and 5 other tenants can move out.
Yes.
So we've seen that.
We've experienced that as well.
And then that one tenant stays for quite a long time without paying the rent. So that has been our experience about 7 years ago now on a property which we then put on a long lease.
Yes.
So we took out the risk of that. So that's on one side of the spectrum. On the co-living, we don't have those issues because we've learnt those lessons. And when we're trying to curate that community, tenant vetting is very, very important. And there are lots of ways that you can do that, even involving the existing tenants to help choose their new housemate. And it's something whereby if you create a co-living style property, you get multiple applications, which allows you to be picky with who moves in, especially with legislative change, which is on the horizon. It's something whereby you need to be able to choose your tenant so that they are a good addition to the house rather than a detractor.
And these are still all on separate tenancies. They're not on a collective one joint tenancy. They're all separate tenants.
All separate tenancies. Joint tenants are going to be a problem in the new legislation. So even people that do joint tenancies would probably be advised to move on to room onlys. So we do room only.
Just elaborate what you see in the regulation that will change, that will cause a negative impact on joint tenancies.
So the problem with joint tenancies in the current proposal of the Renters' Rights Bill means that if one tenant gives notice on a joint tenancy, it allows everyone to move out.
Right.
So you can't hold one person accountable to their tenancy, and it
like you were able to before.
Yes, exactly.
Or
so you might be able to vary the AST, whereas now it's a case of I would suggest that every room goes on its own tenancy agreement.
Yes. And
then they've got their own duration.
Yes, that's really interesting. I mean, rightly or wrongly, my first HMO was about 15 years ago now, 14, 15 years ago. I had a joint tenancy, and what I would do is I'd allow one person on and kind of amend the tenancy. And after about 3 or 4 years, the original tenants are all left. The tenancy was still the same. All these other people had come on and off, and I was still trying to figure stuff out those early days. Well, that's how I did it.
Well, I've been a tenant all my life. I still am a tenant to this day of my own home. And I've moved. I lived in a house in London, which was a 3-bed HMO. It was additional licensing, so it was a licensed HMO. Yeah. And the tenancy agreement that I was on was about 15 years old. So it had been amended so many times with the deed of variation that you didn't sign the tenancy agreement, you signed the deed of variation to the original tenancy agreement. Yes. So that's the first time I'd seen that.
Interesting. But actually, just as a side thought, you mentioned just now that you're a tenant.
Yes.
And that's a question that pops up sometimes. People think, when you invest in property, do you put money into your own home, or do you actually use money to invest in property, allow that to give you the income, and then choose where you live? And I know you spent some time in Bali recently as well, and hence why I'm asking this question as well.
Yeah, so I've been investing now since 2015, so 9 or 10 years. And I always keep thinking, well, when I started investing, it's like, I want to own my own home. Before I knew about property investing, I was starting to save, I was starting to get myself into a position, because being self-employed, it's always harder to get a mortgage.
Yes.
And then when I learned about property investing, I realized that I could invest in other properties, rent those out. So I'm still a homeowner, it's just not my own home. And whenever I get into this position of, maybe I've got some cash coming in, or maybe we get into a mortgageable position, I think, well, maybe I should use that money to buy our own home.
Yes.
But then I start going through the motions, and to be fair, it's hard with, even as a property investor, to get regulated residential mortgages.
Yes.
It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
The banks just don't like us, even though you may have assets. Yes. So whenever I've started, I might spend a couple of months working towards it, and I give up and I just put the money in another property, another investment property.
And I understand the logic that I guess both sides of the argument is, one side is security, it's peace of mind. When you question, is it really security if you've got your own home, versus if you are renting, you can choose to live wherever you want, when you want, you can move as and when you feel you want to as well.
But just to give you an example, I've got 2 young kids, and when the second one came along, we were starting to feel the pinch with our house. It was just a little bit too small. The rooms, we were renting it, so if we owned it, we'd probably knock the air, knock it through. So we were just getting really frustrated, and it was at Christmas I was just like, maybe we should move, see what's out there. And we looked on Rightmove, and this was one of those times where the universe was playing games with us and providing opportunities. And there was an absolutely stunning property for rent in our price bracket that had a spare room that we could get a lodger in. And something whereby it just made complete sense. Went and looked at it, fell in love with it, put an offer in between Christmas and New Year. So we decided probably on Boxing Day that we wanted to move, and 5 weeks later we were in.
Wow.
So, and for those people who move in their own homes will know that you could be doing that 3, 4, 5 months. I think it's known as one of the most stressful parts of life is moving house. Whereas it was stressful, we had to pack the house up, we had to unpack it, we've got movers, but it was very straightforward. We were in and out, job done.
We'll get into how you got into property in a short while. HMOs, most people realize it's the high cash flow. That's why people get into them. But what created the distinction of going next level, literally?
I was in Australia, came home from Australia, and I was working to get in more into the music industry.
Right.
And it was as I was trying to grow businesses within music that I came across a property training course.
You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book onto the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast. Okay.
And I was being taught by these guys who were older than me, like 20 years older than me, and they were telling me, yo, you don't have to, you have to live in your property, it's not for you. And I was sitting there going, yeah, I do have to live in these properties because I'm a tenant.
Yes.
I'm the demographic of the people that I want to rent to. I'm the age of the people I want to rent to.
Yes.
And yes, I do need to see myself living in these properties, because if I wouldn't rent it, then my tenant demographic's not going to rent it.
What they were saying is that you can just create something very basic. Yeah. You're going to rent it out. Don't worry, you're not going to live in it. It's not for you.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're thinking, well, actually, that isn't necessarily the case.
That isn't the case, because I am me, and I am that demographic. So we made the decision quite quickly that we wanted to do good quality properties. You know, generally all en suites, so washing facilities are generally one of the biggest issues in shared houses. So we take that issue away, we put en suites in, we then have quality rooms, big rooms, good space, well-designed properties. And our early ones are quite basic because we were learning. And then
we all go through that transition. Well, we don't necessarily need to, but a lot of us that have been in the business a long time have been through that transition.
Yeah, and they're the ones, the properties that you sometimes think, oh, shall I just get rid of that one?
Yes.
But you also know that they're not the best properties in the world, therefore they're not going to get necessarily the best price in the world. So we often just keep them around because they're great and they work. But we've always wanted to do the next property better than the last. So we take all of our learnings and apply it to the next property, anything that's not quite working. And once you've managed an HMO or you've been involved in HMO management for a few years, you can see some of the things that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of on day one with certain layouts, certain things in kitchens, bathrooms that are maybe more high maintenance, which cause issues with tenants and they complain about it. So you can fix that in future schemes. So
your thinking was really putting myself in the shoes of the person that's going to live here, thinking if I was going to live here, what would I want? How would I want it to be? And you've taken that approach rather than a traditional landlord approach of what's going to be financially efficient.
It's both.
Okay.
Because it has to be hand in hand.
Yes.
Because it's still an investment at the end of the day. And you could say, oh, this is absolutely stunning property, and you could spend, hundreds of thousands of pounds doing an HMO up. But that's never going to work financially.
Yes.
So you're never going to buy it in the first place because it's just not going to stack. So it's value engineering a solution to the tenant problem. And we have a methodology. I wrote about it in my book, and it's what we teach. It's called the tenant first method.
Yes.
And the tenant first method is about putting the tenant, who's your customer, at the heart of every decision that you make.
Yes.
And in any other business, you identify a problem, then you identify the solution to that problem and who you're helping, and you get paid handsomely for delivering that service or solution. Yes. So in property, the problem is housing, and the problem with the problem being housing is that you can just create something and people will live in it because we need accommodation.
There's a shortage of accommodation. Yeah.
Exactly. Supply is massively outstripped by demand. So with HMOs, it's a affordable form of accommodation. So generally people fall over themselves to rent rooms, but like any other business, there is a marketplace, and our goal is to stand out within that marketplace, which is why we do co-living, the next level HMOs, to be in the top 5% of our market, 5 to 10% depending on the size of the market. And then we can have a very successful and profitable business, as well as a beautiful place for someone to live.
So when we talk about the top 5%, are we talking about the in terms of the rent somebody's paying, or how when we think about the top 5%, value of the property, or?
There's a bit of both, to be fair. So if you look at the spectrum of HMOs in any major town or city, which is where you're going to be doing this, you've got, let's say, 10,000 HMOs. So the top 5% of that is a certain number. So you know that if you do the best quality, you're going to be in the top, 100, 500 HMOs, and there's a lot of scope to build quality.
Yes.
So it's part of the research that you do. Our clients do a lot of this, is looking at competitor analysis. What's the market like in the area, and what rents can I charge in that area? If I'm going to do a really quality next level HMO, does it then become out of people's affordability?
Yes.
So it's still got to be affordable. And in some towns, the top 5% is not as luxury as in other towns.
Yes.
Because in some towns, you have to really compete, because there are other quality properties, and you've got to stand out. Whereas in others, then just by putting an ensuite, that's what we found when we started investing. Just the ensuite got us
a distinction straight away.
A massive distinction, because not a lot of people were doing it. Now, a lot of people do ensuites.
It's like becomes a baseline now.
It does, and a lot of people are now going, well, you don't need to do ensuites because the demand is so high. But my general rule of thumb is, if you've got 2 people, they should only ever be sharing one bathroom. So the ratio of 2 to 1 has the same effect of mitigating the complications and arguments between tenants.
Yeah, so if there's going to be a compromise, 1 bathroom between 2 would be a minimum, really.
For in the way that I view it, yes.
It makes sense, and I agree. In that experience, bathrooms are key in terms of what tenants want. Wi-Fi comes first, bathroom second.
Yes.
Then in terms of determining the rent, what would you say compared to market rates, where you create the positioning for your product? So at the top end, how different is that percentage or monetary terms wise?
It's a good question. Whenever we're researching an area, there's lots of data about room rentals, and spareroom.co.uk is where most rooms are transacted, where it's the marketplace for people to look. And there are a few other marketplaces as well, but Spareroom has the most data.
They dominate the market.
They dominate the market.
And they've got good data as well to show you what rates are in certain towns.
They do. So you can go and you can check the average rent. So we always go and look at what is the average rent in this postcode for, we always do double size rooms for single occupancy. So a double room with all the bills included. And what does that number look like? And then we can compare it to the highest rents that are being achieved in the area, because the Spareroom gives you that range.
Yes.
And then what I do is I go look through and just look at the rooms that are available for rent, sorting it from the most expensive down, because you end up with random things on Spareroom like studio flats.
Yeah, I was looking at something yesterday, and we're with one of our students, and the rate was horrendously high. And I was thinking, why is that so expensive? And I looked at it, and the towels are all wrapped up on the bedding. You think they're using this for service accommodation. It's not a HMO.
Yeah, so you do end up with that random use of Spareroom.
Yes.
So you sift all that out, and then look at the real HMO competitors and go, right, what is the quality of that room? What is it being listed as? Being aware that not necessarily renting for that price, but then you get a sense of, well, there's 10 rooms available for rent that are of okay to great quality, over £700 a month, and then we can go, right, we know that we can hit at least this.
Yes.
And then when we're developing a co-living property, it's going to take 6 to 9 months before we actually let it. So my estimation would be, well, we could probably add at least 5% to that, to take into account the growth over a year. And then we probably aim to list it maybe 10% higher and just see what we get. And it's something we like to do, actually, is to place an advert on a portal, anywhere we can do it, and just see what kind of response we get.
Yes.
Or speak to someone who's already doing it in the area, or a letting agent in the area that specialises specifically in HMOs.
One thing that got me thinking recently is, often once we finished our HMOs, we'll get them professionally photographed and then start advertising. And then we probably lose about a month, and that's a lot of rent when we actually think about it, especially when you're charging high rents. And something that got me thinking recently is, actually, we should probably use photographs from other properties, because we know roughly what they're going to look like, and start marketing them early to test where the market is, because we like to as well look at the price and say, right, we're going to go higher than that, and let's see what happens. Because you just need one person to fall in love with it and say, I really want this. That's what we need. Yeah. Something else I found interesting and a worthwhile exercise, when you're looking at the competitor rates in terms of who else is charging what in the market, is to keep an eye on how long those rooms are available. And especially, as you said, it can take months to get the property ready. And if you keep an eye on those adverts, if that room's been advertised for weeks and weeks and weeks, there's probably something not quite right. And if it disappeared within a week, it gives you a good sense there seems to be sufficient demand that the rooms are coming and going fairly quickly.
Yeah, there used to be some software that tracked all of that on Spare Room, but I don't think it's still around, which is a bit frustrating because obviously the speed of letting is the best indication of demand, and that's the key data that Spare Room doesn't give you. But you can track it by yourself by linking to those ads. And when you're actively researching an area, going onto Spare Room almost every day, but at least once a week, and just seeing how it changes, the number of rooms available, the number of people looking, and see how demand changes over time. Because at the moment, there are some areas I've noticed where the number of good quality rooms is jumping up quite a lot, and the rents are becoming a bit stagnant, and the ratio of people looking to rooms available is actually becoming less and less and less. And a few years ago, we experienced it where in quite a few areas, there was a surplus of rooms to tenants. So the market does fluctuate. I don't think we're going to see how it's fluctuated in the past in the near future, because the number of HMOs, in the last 6 years, we've lost 10% of our HMO stock. I don't know whether you knew that. It was a ONS statistic that came out.
Wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so you know, we're losing a lot of HMO rooms. I think it's about 40,000 rooms a year. That makes quite a difference, because there's a lot of people using this as an entry point into accommodation as well. So more and more people are living in HMOs, and if there's a shortage, that also pushes up the rent. And in all the years that we've been doing HMOs, probably about 15 odd years now, it was probably just before COVID, it was the first time we experienced it was taking us longer to let rooms. Prior to that, we never really struggled to let rooms. And I was thinking maybe the market's changing and everything. And then COVID happened. And then the concern was, what if these tenants stop paying? We're going to have a major problem if we've got all these tenants stop paying. We can manage a few, but all of them, it could be a problem. And thank God that didn't happen. And then the market just exploded in terms of the rates, the demand. It was just insane. What's been your experience now? What do you think has caused that after lockdown, for the rents to go up so high and the demand to be so high? Well, I think during COVID, a lot of people we found a lot of people stayed put. And I had actually just finished a refurbishment in March 2020. And so we were going for rental in April, and we had this dilemma of, do we drop the rents? How do we get people in? Are we actually allowed to put people in? What we're allowed to do? And we took the decision to not drop the rents and to keep them high, because this was one of our best quality properties. And that decision paid off, because we did rent the rooms. It took a little bit longer than it done before, but those rents have been high, and they're the highest rents we've got this is in Warrington. But it did take longer. But before that, before COVID, we had actually seen a bit of a lull. I think it's because there were a lot of people that came into the market, maybe because I was talking about how great Warrington was, and we had a lot of rooms come into the market. So we saw not rent suppression, but just rent stagnation. And then after COVID, we've just seen it absolutely boom. And I think it's partly because of, in that same period of time, we've had tax changes. So a lot of the older landlords who are now no longer able to claim all of their mortgage interest, starting to get out. The average landlord's only got between 1 and 2 properties. So it just requires a bunch of those to go, I'm just going to sell, going to sell.
And there'd be some people who've been doing HMOs 20, 30 years, although we kind of see it as a more fashionable term. The idea of shared accommodation has been around a very long time.
Yeah, bedsits.
Yes.
You know. Yeah, my mum tells me stories of the bedsits she used to be in at university. You know, with a stove on the floor and, you know, rats and all of this. So it is definitely something which is, you know, and there's landlords that have had properties for that long that are still own properties.
And they don't spend any money on some.
No, they don't.
Some of those still exist in that format.
And they're the ones that I think the government are trying to get out of the market. So, and they don't always stay as HMOs, because quite often it doesn't make any sense or financial sense to convert them to HMOs anymore, because the dynamics of the numbers in that area have changed. So it makes more sense to refurbish to a house, or homeowners come in and do it. So there's a lot of incentives for people, well, I suppose the right incentives for people to sell, because it's quite expensive to get out now, and probably going to get more expensive to sell. But if you don't have the cash, a lot of landlords don't have lots of cash to invest £50,000 in bringing their property up to scratch, to renew their license. So they just sell instead.
So when you create a really beautiful room and environment, there's clearly going to be a desire for people to want to move into that. But how is that met with affordability, in terms of them being able to actually afford to move in and sustain that sort of a rent?
There's a couple of things here. First of all, we always go out, and when we're marketing the rooms, part of what we do is we compare the rent of a studio flat or a one-bed flat that they could go and see.
Yes.
And to be fair, most of the time there are very few on the market.
Yeah.
And we say, well, you can get this studio flat for £800 a month, and then we summarise all the bills that they've got to pay. So council tax, water, electricity, gas, internet, and they say if you were to go and live by yourself, it'd be £800 plus £300 a bill. So it's actually costing you £1,100.
Plus probably furnishing it as well.
And you've got to have the furniture, and you don't have as much facility.
Yes.
So you say, well, £1,100, you can get that. So it literally is a beige box. And then even a stunning HMO property, our rooms are probably on average 13, 14 square meters.
Yes.
Some of them up to 20 square meters. So they got
a nice size,
a nice
rather than
size
tiny little bedrooms. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, we don't like to go right to the limits, because the limits can change. The government could have a change of heart and increase minimum room sizes by even half a square meter, would actually put a lot of landlords out of business.
Yes, because the smallest rooms are no longer usable.
Correct. So we like to create a large room, which is the space element, and then we create beautiful community-driven kitchen. So something where you can, the facilities we like to over provide, and then we have seating area, dining area. So generally somewhere between 3 and 4 square meters per person of communal space, 5 square meters if we can.
Okay.
And on some of our commercial conversions to HMO, we actually are exceeding that, and we're getting, I'm not sure per person, but we're talking it's between 70 and 80 square meters for 13, 14 people. Wow. So it's a lot of communal space per person, and over 3 or 4 different rooms.
Yes, you can probably get a games room in there, and then a cinema room as well.
Games room, cinema room.
Oh, you literally are putting those in?
Yeah. In some of them.
Yes.
And it becomes, we're not talking purpose-built co-living where you've got 500 rooms and all these amazing spaces. But the larger properties that we can buy as commercial properties allow us to do a bit more carving up and a bit more creativity, where the council will allow.
So when you started in property, within about 4 years, you did about £5 million of a property, built a portfolio that size, that quick, and then continue to grow it at quite an accelerated speed. Then you've also started doing commercial properties, taking commercial properties and turning them straight into HMOs. Tell us a little bit more. You touched on some of the larger buildings. I guess the constraint in a house is you're limited to where the walls are. Yes, you can knock about some walls internally, but you're quite restricted to what physical shape there already is in that property. Yeah,
exactly. The constraints of the building dictate what you can do. And even on our bigger schemes, like 8 beds, 10 beds, we're often spending quite a lot of money in putting steel in to allow us to make the rooms the right sizes, because we do like to invest. And because we go larger properties, it has payback through the commercial valuation we get. But with commercial space, generally the rooms are bigger. We've got a lot more to play with. I mean, it might be an older building, so we have to play around with it. But ideally, you get more space to play with. And the great thing about, in fact, you mentioned about my initial growth. I did my first commercial conversion, was my 4th project.
Oh wow! Okay.
I kind of did it by accident because it was just cheap. It was
cheap in terms of it was a cheap building to buy.
Yeah.
In comparison to a house.
Yeah, I'll give you the numbers. It was so on this street in the centre of Warrington, you could buy a house, like a 3-bed house, for probably about 100 and at the time for about 110, 120,000. It's back in 2016, and then we bought this office that was big enough for an 8-bedroom HMO and a 1-bedroom flat in the basement. We bought it for 147.
Oh wow! Okay.
So in terms of a price per square foot, it was a hell of a lot cheaper than the residential property. And we that same on 2015 and 2016, we bought a house for 105 that became a 5-bed HMO, a house for 110 that became a 6-bed HMO. And we actually bought one at auction for 87 that became a 6-bed HMO as well. And that, it was quite a good year. And then the office for 147,000.
Yes.
And then we used permitted development to get it into residential.
Right.
And then we were able to then do planning permissions to get us to 8-bedroom HMO over 3 stories.
Okay.
And then a 1-bedroom flat in the basement with some really large light wells. Right.
And so the flexibility there was you have a bigger building, so you got more space to work with, to create it the way that you want. And something that you did then whether by accident or by design, that you can still do now, is often commercial property is cheaper to buy per square foot than residential is. And that's something you've been focusing on more and more recently?
Yeah, so at the moment we've got a couple going on, one in Portsmouth, where we bought double shop front. Essentially it was the same shape and size as 2 terraced houses. A terraced house in Portsmouth was about 270, 280, and we bought 2 of them for 375. So it was more bang for buck. Yes, we've got to spend more on it because we're going to 13 bedrooms, quite a bit of structural work, because it's an older building from the late 1800s.
Create some efficiencies as well in terms of the construction work, though.
It does, because we've got the double front, and then you're doing one big steel, well, a couple of big steels, and then we've opened up the internals, and then loft conversion as well. And then I've also done a big office in Stockport to convert that into micro flats, not micro flats, but I suppose cluster flats. And the cluster flats are ranged between 2 and 5 bedrooms each. So we created 20 bedrooms over 7 flats.
Right.
Again, that was a like an 1860s building. So
so just the commercial stuff alone, along with your partner, you've probably done about £10 million of just commercial to straight to HMO conversions. Yes,
between me and 𝗵𝗲𝗷 is he's basically our most successful client turned mentor. Mentor now.
Okay, yes, because he works alongside you in terms of supporting students.
He does. He supports our students, and he's helping because we have launching a brand new commercial to HMO training, and he's helping me to deliver that because he's
taking that knowledge of going straight from commercial property to HMO, which very few people do, and we've done it like step by step, but not kind of just gone straight from a commercial building straight into HMO. And it's taking that knowledge and kind of sharing. Okay, this is how we've done it, and this is how you should do it. Take that approach.
Yeah, definitely. He purchased when he started working with us in our mastermind. He'd purchased 13 HMOs in 12 months.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's going for it.
He really went for it, and then over the course of the following couple of years, then transitioned into. He saw what we were doing with some of our commercial conversions, and then just started getting commercial deals.
Right.
So mixed use projects and other large, like warehouse. And I mean, he can talk about that, but other large projects where he's getting between 20 and 30 to 35 rooms in these projects, and just going through planning, using elements of permitted development and planning permission to get the desired outcome, to really maximise an underutilised building and create the most value out of it.
Yes.
And that's what I love about HMOs in general, is the fact that you can maximise a building, still create an amazing space for someone to live, and get the most value out of it.
When we're talking about some of these projects, there's different sizes. What sort of sizes typically would you do these conversions in terms of number of tenants in a building?
So it ranges. So the smallest commercial conversion I've done is a 4-bed HMO and a shop.
Okay.
So it what it did is give me a
5 units essentially.
So it's 5 units, and that was a commercial valuation on a 4-bed HMO in a non-Article 4 area, which you don't normally get.
Yeah.
So that building got valued at about $230, whereas my 6-bed HMO around the corner got valued at 180.
Okay.
So that was a difference, and that was back in 2018 around then. So they've both got up in value since then. But it shows that if you do a mixed use and use a commercial conversion type approach, it gives you commercial valuation on the smaller projects. Then when you look at the larger projects, I think the largest one I've done is 20, and that is structured as cluster flats.
Right.
The largest one 𝗵𝗲𝗷's doing is 35,
right,
and that again is being clustered in a way that you're not sharing with 35 people, because I can imagine if you're watching this, you're thinking, there's absolutely nowhere I want to share with 30 other people.
Yes, one kitchen or one fridge.
Not one. No, it's definitely not that. It's a common sense approach. We're not talking about creating a hotel where you've got a corridor, definitely not a hostel. It's about creating your room and thinking about it from the individual's perspective first. What's the facilities and the amenities they've got in their bedroom, which is the same we would do in a normal HMO as a commercial conversion, and then what is the facilities they've got outside their room and how many people are sharing that facility.
Right.
And we've done surveys in the past. We were the founder of the Shared Living Survey, and that gave us statistics that people really want to share with between 3 and 5 people. Through our experience, people are generally happy sharing up to about 8 or 9 as well. When we go beyond 8 or 9 rooms, we generally would introduce a second communal space. Normally we'd have one open plan, large living kitchen diner, and we zone it using furniture and some built-in elements. And then when we go to the larger number of rooms, we then start to split it across multiple floors. So it might be so for example, our Portsmouth project is 13 people, but there's 3 communal spaces. All are deemed as kitchens.
Right.
So you have a kitchen designed for kitchen dining, then you have a kitchen designed for kitchen cinema room, kitchen lounge.
Yes.
And then we have our upstairs kitchen, which is kitchen working.
Right.
So, and that's next to 2 very large rooms on the top floor. And I think in general, we're going to charge a premium for those because they're probably going to be the only ones using their kitchen. So it's almost like having these 2 little studio flats with their own private kitchen and workspace.
And in terms of the financial model, it's purchasing one of these properties, often spending a significant amount of money to create the co-living space, the next level HMO, and then to remortgage it based on its commercial value. So what's been your experience of obtaining commercial valuations, trying to get them right, the investment figures, the holy grail, if you like?
It is most definitely the holy grail. It's a dark art.
Yes.
And even today, one of our other mentors at the HMO platform was putting in our WhatsApp group. He's had a down valuation, one of his. He's done everything correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes you still can't get it right. So we were brainstorming ideas of things he could do, but he's going to have to go and have a second bite of the cherry. Going to have to change surveyor, change bank, and try again.
Yes.
But we have got a long list of things that you can do to ensure that you maximize your chance of getting that value that you believe your property is worth. And the benefit of doing a co-living or next level HMO is that if you create something absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful, you generally find that the surveyors are now trying to work out how to get to your number, not how to downvalue you.
Yes.
So we always have to justify our rent roll. So if you're going into an area and you're doing the 10-15% above any other rents, your surveyor is going to be cautious and go, you know what, I have to value this based on today's market.
Yes. And you might be getting that, but that could be an anomaly.
Correct.
But they want to cover themselves as well.
They want to make sure that when that person moves out, you can get it again. Even if you turn up with all the tenancy agreements, which I'd always suggest, turn with the tenancy agreements. And even if that says something higher, they can still bring it down by 5-10% of certain rooms if they think it's unsustainable. Long term, of course, it's sustainable. Yes. So the great thing about property is that time is a healer. Time will always solve your problems because rents will always go up, capital values will always go up. So it's about ensuring that you have what you need today to make it work. And then we always look at modelling our projects over 5 years and over 10 years because they're long-term holds. So maybe we would accept a slightly lower return on investment now, knowing that over 5 years or 10 years, we're hitting like mega returns.
Yes.
I wouldn't not do a deal because my return on investment is 2% lower than the last one.
Yes.
Because I might be able to value engineer it higher. I might hit the commercial valuation I want. I always go conservative when I'm appraising a deal. And then so when I'm adding more fat in later with the rents going up and yields, which can fluctuate. They can. And in a market where valuers are uncertain or there's uncertainty, they do like to maybe add 1% or 0.5% just to cover themselves. But we always provide a valuation pack and all of the evidence. We don't assume anything. We basically do the valuer's job for them. Yes.
So essentially, there's some things we can control, like what the rent is, how the property looks, etc. And things we have no control over is the surveyor's opinion, the lender's criteria, or the criteria that's not obvious, that we're not necessarily aware of, that their appetite that they might have at that moment in time. All these things will have a bearing in terms of how that valuation comes out. As you said, there's certain things you can do. You suggested some great ones there. Maybe before you give us a couple of more kind of suggestions people could do to try and get that valuation right. It's using good brokers that understand what you're trying to do rather than a generic broker that says, oh, I can see on the software it says you can get this product with this lender, let's just make the application. It's having those specialists in your team to help get those outcomes.
Definitely. And there's in terms of commercial valuations, there's more than one tier of commercial valuation. It depends on the lender that you're using. So first and foremost, you need an HMO specialist broker, as you said, that is doing HMO applications on a weekly basis. And you need to understand how the valuation is instructed by the bank. So you need to understand what the bank's view, because the bank will tell you, or a BDM at a bank will tell you, yes, we can do that. And then when you go down the track, it gets harder and harder to hit what you originally thought you were going to get. So having done this quite a few times, like yourself, you'll know there are certain banks that will tell you yeah, we do commercial valuation, but yeah, that commercial valuation will be 100 or 200k less than a different bank.
Yes.
So they're different
because the method they're using calculating it. Yes.
Exactly. So understanding the bank, their methodology, understanding the panel that the valuer is part of, because that plays a part. Because I've seen panels downvalue it where a valuer's agreed with you and then it's been downvalued by a panel, which is just weird. And then the surveyor themselves. So there's a few variables to getting the right valuation, and sometimes it takes a few goes to hit on the right combination. And we've definitely hit the right combination in certain areas of the country, which is working for us right now. And then in other areas, we've got clients and some of our team that are doing other deals. And again, they found a combination which is working, and we share that with people we're working with to make sure that they guarantee that best outcome. It's always about chatting to other investors, other professionals, other colleagues that are actively in the market. And that's why I love being an HMO specialist and not generalizing in different strategies. We always end up with the HMO at the end.
Yes.
So everything we do is conducive to getting the result we want, which is the best bang for buck, the best return on investment, the most cash flow, and then the best valuation at the end to maximize the project.
In terms of a criteria that you set, because you mentioned some key metrics there, is there a certain criteria that you look to try and achieve? So for example, it might be it needs to earn a minimum of £1,000, or we need to get all our money out of the deal. Or is there certain key criteria that you look for that you want to be able to achieve in a project?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is down to personal preference, and it's something that I always discuss with people we're working with. They say, what are you trying to achieve from property investing? What's your capital requirement? What's your funding line? Are you working with investors? Are you self-funding? And all these things play a part, because if you're working with investors, you've got to have more meat on the bone. You maybe have to try and pull most of the cash back. If you're doing joint ventures, obviously they will have a criteria they're looking to hit. And if you've got your own cash, you might be happy to take a slightly lower return because you don't have to share it with anybody.
Yes.
So the all money out deal, I think that they do happen. We've done a few of them. Mihal's working on a couple of commercial conversions which are going to take all the money out. I mean, there's a chance one of ours in Portsmouth will take all the money out. It depends on on a few variations, but we're happy, and we've got a range of scenarios that we're happy with at the end. So it happens more on the commercial to HMO conversions because you've got more fat on the bone.
Yes. On
the houses, again, it can happen if you're buying well enough, or if you're managing your costs well enough. And generally we see it happen more with planning permission and planning gain, where you can uplift the value and triple the value of the property through that piece of paper and through the construction. So for me personally, if I could pull all the money out, brilliant, because I can 100% own that asset using investor funds and pay them back, and then that's mine. But if we're hitting a 20, 30, 40% return, I'm not going to say no to that deal. What it does is it targets what I need from the cash.
Yes.
So if I find an investor that's happy with a 10% return on their money, as long as they've got some ownership in the property, then we'll do the deal. They'll get their 10% and I'll get the other 10%, and I won't have put any cash in, but I'll have done all the work. I'll have found the deal, I'll have sorted it out, and they would have benefited from my experience. If someone's got a higher appetite for ROI, then we have to specifically find deals for them, which may or may not happen. So I'm a big believer in doing deals than not, because I said time is a healer. So if someone says to me, I want a 50% return annualized on my money, I say, right, okay, give me 10 years and I'll hit it.
Yes. Yes.
and give me 10 years and I'll exceed your expectations.
Yes. And when we're talking about projects, you're not focused on one specific location. You work in different locations. I tend to be a bit of a control freak and just Birmingham and surrounding areas, and that's it. And but you're very open to working in new locations, further afield.
I am, and I'm quite envious of people who have a patch that works and is big enough. So like Birmingham is a patch that's big enough. I never, because I started in Warrington as a patch, it's not really big enough to grow a multi-million pound portfolio because there's a ceiling.
Yes.
So I talked about that top 5%.
Yeah, and you can saturate your own market.
Yeah, 100%. And that's essentially what I did at the night when I started. We did 20, 30 rooms, and then we let it set and settle in. And then we saw it being easy to rent rooms, then a bit harder, and then easier. And so we did some more in the area a couple of years later. So we were able to gauge it. So in a market like that, you have to be on top of it because you can't just go and do like 100 HMOs. In Birmingham, you could probably go to 100 HMOs and it's not really going to touch the side of the market because it's such a big market.
There are thousands of rooms already on the market.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm in a few different areas. I'm in smaller areas like Warrington, I've got some stuff in Newcastle, Coventry, in around Portsmouth and Kent. So we've chosen mid-sized towns, and we've invested in each area strategically at the time, which made sense. Sometimes looking back, it doesn't quite make as much sense now as it did at the time, but every deal was done for a reason in that location. There was an opportunity that was spotted, or multiple opportunities, and we just implemented it. And because we've got different areas around the country, we like to have control of our management because we saw a big disparity in how our rooms were being managed.
Yes.
So over about 5 years, we realized that we could probably do this better and more consistently by, even though the properties are all over the country, having a centralized process.
Yes.
So we set that up, and then it became known as CoHome, which is our management agency. I have very little to do with the day-to-day, but it means that we can do 80%, 90% of our processes are virtual.
Yes.
And the 10% which is on the ground, we have point people in different regions. So we're in Portsmouth, in Birmingham, in Manchester, in Kent. We've got point people.
Yes.
And then when we don't have point people, we can use online services like 𝗵𝗲𝗍 to plug the gaps and give us basically 100% coverage of time. So we can send out someone to do a viewing at any time, but we only send someone to go see a property when we've vetted them.
Yeah.
So this, you mentioned photographs, virtual tours, videos. We do all of that, and always do that when you finish a project, because your house will never look the same again.
As soon as the first tenant moves in.
As soon as the first tenant, it's done. So always do it at the point of the end of the refurbishment. And then we use that to show the room and show the property. It's a good SLA as well, because our house has to look great when they move in. So we have to make sure that it's well maintained, and we have good landlords that we manage for that do maintain their properties. We maintain our own. In fact, we make it mandatory to have an element of control over the maintenance, so that we can maintain the quality and the standard of the accommodation, which means that then we can retain the quality and the standard of the tenant on behalf of the landlord. So, and it means that they're going to stay longer and they're going to pay the rent, everything we talked about earlier. And
just picking up on that thought, a thought came to my mind. I was speaking to somebody a couple of days ago about a boiler they were looking to replace, and they talked about, we're looking for one that's got like a 7-year warranty or something, which I think a lot of them have now anyway. And I said, they were asking me about what we do, and I said, look, what we tend to do is put a good boiler in, or any appliance for that matter, and we don't rely on the warranty. Because if the washing machine breaks or the boiler stops working, if we're relying on the manufacturer warranty for send somebody out, that could be a day or 2 days for somebody to come out, then they need a part, that's another couple of days for them to get that organized. There could be several days your tenant is without the use of that appliance, and that's
it's not just one tenant.
Yeah, and it's detrimental to that whole household. And so we just take it on the chin that if there's an issue, we just send one of our maintenance guys, deal with it straight away, whatever it is, whatever the cost, just deal with it straight away. And I think what happens is the tenants start recognizing that you care about the property, that you're on top of it all the time, and they start caring as well. Yeah. And in scenarios where I see where the landlord is very slow in responding to things, or you can see maintenance builds up over time and gets neglected, the tenants stop caring because they see the landlord doesn't care. Yeah.
It's about gaining favor.
Yes.
So there will be a time in the future where you need a favour from your tenants in some way, shape or form, and we've got to build up that trust.
Goodwill, yeah.
So what we do is the same as you. You can get the manufacturer's warranty, but also a lot of manufacturers won't warranty certain appliances in an HMO because of the amount of
usage.
And appliances, once you've done this for 10 years, you're going to replace every 10 years a fridge probably twice, washing machine probably
times.
a few times they get absolutely battered.
Yeah.
There's one particular house where we have to fit a top loader because it didn't fit in the end.
Right.
The actual washing machine didn't fit, so it's a top loading washing machine which is smaller, and it breaks every 2 years.
Right. It might be cheaper to physically move the wall and get the washing machine, regular washing machine in.
Yeah, we've looked at that. It's not. It's a steel beam.
Right.
It's a steel beam that had to go in. It was unexpected, and it reduces the size of the kitchen. And there's a window. That's the whole thing. We've looked at it, and it's cheaper to spend £350 on a washing machine every 2 years than it is to change it.
It's so important that it's in your benefit that the house has been looked after. It's a valuable asset.
Yeah, and then that's why one of the things that we like to focus on is proactive maintenance. So there's the reaction where something breaks, you send someone immediately to fix it. But if you can spot something before it breaks, you're going to save yourself time, money.
Yes.
And if, for example, there's a dripping tap, there's a handle on a door which is falling off, a cut wardrobe door which is,
hinges playing up,
which just happens all the time. And so, like once a quarter, you do a property inspection, but you send someone who's skilled to fix things.
Yes.
So
but
instead of just going around
and
they're just going around ticking the boxes. They're going around, they're ticking boxes, and they're fixing it whilst they're there. It makes complete sense. And why don't people just do that? It's the same cost. I mean, you might spend a little bit more on the handyman for a couple of hours, but do that, and then it costs you clean the filter.
Yes.
On the tumble dryer, take all these little bits where things could go wrong.
They often just get missed or neglected. And I'm smiling because our approach is very similar to that, and that tends not to be the way most letting agents think.
Yes.
And landlords tend not to think about it that way, but actually that proactiveness of looking after the property, it's going to be way cheaper to repair that handle problem now than eventually when it gets ripped off the door or whatever, and now you've got much more damage that you have to deal with simply because it got delayed in terms of getting it fixed.
Definitely.
So you're doing a great job here, but you're also being recognized for doing a great job because there are lots of awards you've won in this space, and some more than once as well.
Yes, so we're very fortunate to be recognized at the Property Investors Awards. It was the first award we won, and it was for Best Co-Living Deal of the Year 2022. That was with Niall Scott, who was my business partner at the time, and it was one of our projects in Portsmouth. That it was a 7-bedroom property, but we won Best Co-Living Deal of the Year because it wasn't just about the quality of the house we created, but also about everything we've talked about with building community, and we were able to demonstrate that through the awards and the application process. So to demonstrate that we're doing co-living, not just a fancy HMO.
Yes.
So because I think there's still this misunderstanding about what co-living is. A lot of people say they're doing co-living, but in reality they're not. They're just trying to manage an HMO well, or they create something epic and they give it to the wrong agent. So
who doesn't understand how to run that type of property. Yes,
and there's lots of tips and tricks and little secrets that we like to share to get co-living done really effectively, which are really cost effective and time effective, and sometimes, most of the time, is free. It's just a different way of managing and different way of dealing with tenants, because we will, for example, so the property maintenance should be taken care of. It should be a matter of course. So that our approach on co-home is actually people management. So we have community managers rather than property managers. So that's the approach, is managing the people rather than the property. The property should be just taken care of, like we talked about earlier. So we won Co-Living Deal of the Year in 2022. And then we also won 3 awards at 2022's HMO Awards for the same property, management, and for the book and the training.
Excellent.
As well. Was it 3 awards or 4? I can't remember now.
Yes.
But so we won an award there, and then
you've got a clutch of awards.
Well, a clutch, and then this year has been really good. 2024 has been good to us because we won Best Training Provider in the country at the HMO Awards. So we won 2 years in a row.
Yes.
And that enables us to say we are the best place in the country to come and learn about HMOs. Our clients are very successful, and one of the things that the judge said was that they judge it on longevity of support, and how whenever we're working with people, it's not just about come to a 2-day event or a 3-day event. It's actually all of our trainings come with support, so that you can actually get something out of them regardless of what price point they're at. So that's something which is really important to us. And then I won a Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't feel old enough
I was
to
going to say,
have
I
won.
can't see any white hairs yet.
I mean, trust me, they're there. But I won a Lifetime Achievement Award as part of the HMO Council Tax Reform Group.
Wow.
So myself, Darren Brewer and 𝗦𝗵𝗃 𝗠𝗲, who were recognised as
the driving force of preventing rooms getting banded individually, so you're not having to pay council tax on every room in the house, which is where it was heading.
Correct. Did you have any of yours rebanded?
No.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, so Birmingham, there wasn't much of that happening, but the surrounding towns like Dudley and Walsall, we saw that happening.
Yeah, it's actually starting to happen now. I've got a couple of people in Birmingham that have been rebanded.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Historically. So it's all a bit weird.
Yes, because it can go back. Yes, and you could end up with a massive surprise bill you weren't expecting.
But interestingly, you're not the one. I mean, this is the whole podcast in of itself. Yes. But legally, you're not actually liable for that bill. The tenants are, which is the interesting fact. Is even if they change it historically, and this is just a thing to note for anyone who's listening that might be in this situation, is don't pay it because you're not liable. Send it back to the council. And what I do is ask for a refund because I've overpaid my council tax because the tenants are responsible. And then it's actually between me and the tenants to resolve the agreement that we had, which was it all inclusive, was council tax included, was it not? And that's a commercial thing, relationship. But legally and liability, as per legislation, says that
the occupant.
The occupier is always the one who's legally liable, regardless of what your contract
and the council
says.
will try it on because often people don't know and they just want to they want the bill paying. If they send somebody, most people won't argue with council tax and just pay it.
I love having conversations with councils and bailiffs and all of that. Just that we have a back and forth because I've had 2 of my properties rebanded.
Right.
They've now gone back to being 1, and I've just bought a property where the landlord was in distress because it got rebanded. They've made no money on this 5-bed HMO in about 3 or 4 years.
It could take a big dent on your income if you're having to pay council tax on every room.
Correct. So I bought it at a discount because they needed to get out, and I actually managed to solve the problem. I didn't realise I was buying it or solving the problem at the time, but we solved the problem for every landlord.
Yes.
And then it happened that I solved the problem for this property, which I purchased, and it's going to make me a lot more money than it made the previous owner, even though they did the development. So that's worked out. That's worked out really well. So I won a Lifetime Achievement Award for what we did, and to be fair, it was a massive group effort. It was just because I won that award doesn't mean that it's part of me. It was the relationships that all of the group in the committee had, and the action that we were able to take and whipping up support that enabled us to get the amendment in and then get Michael Gove to sign it, thankfully, before they
exited.
They chose to exit early.
So that maybe brings us smoothly onto that topic of regulation has a big impact in this business for sure. And we have a new incumbents at number 10 right now, kind of finding their feet a little bit. And how do you think it might kind of play out for us as property investors and some of the reforms and changes that are in the pipeline? Although at time recording we've not yet had the first budget. How do you see things panning out? What's your view?
Well, this is interesting because people might be watching this in 2 years' time and going, well, you got that wrong. So I see Labour pressing ahead with everything they're talking about, pressing ahead, making changes and just seeing what happens. I think it's a big experiment. I think they're going to be playing with the rental market. I think they're playing with tenants' lives.
Yes.
I think they're playing with tenants' ability to pay rent. I think they're messing with people who've got, the average landlord, I said it earlier, is 1 or 2 properties. They're messing with people's pensions, their future savings, their investments, and making them not work for them. And most landlords, like 95% of landlords, are ones that actually care, and they're painting us all with this brush that we're money grabbing, not looking after our tenants, etc. Whereas most landlords actually do. And the few are making problems for the many. And so everyone's going to be affected. So I think they're going to press ahead. And even in the run-up to the budget, they're flip-flopping all the time. They're basically throwing mud against the wall to see what's going to stick.
What the reaction is.
What the reaction is. And then what they're going to deliver they'll be good, they'll be bad, it will hurt, and there'll be opportunity. And our job as investors, entrepreneurs, is to go through that and see where is the opportunity. And there are opportunities that I have seen, which I'm not talking about in case they change it, that I've discussed with others and that I share with kind of are in a circle. It was like, if it stays the same,
Yes.
here's an opportunity. If we talk about it before the budget, they might try and change it because they might. People think they're not watching
Yes.
and listening, but they are
observing. Yes,
they're observing.
Yes,
On
what the landlord community has to say. Yeah,
correct. And they'll just Google landlords and HMOs, and this podcast might come up. I'm like, okay, so what they're doing, what landlords thinking they're going to do, and one of the reasons why Labour have changed some of their views is because people shouted about what was it if you're going to move into the home as a reason for eviction, you just serve them notice and say we're going to move in.
Yes,
and then landlords were going and saying, oh yeah, we'll just serve that and we'll get them out and then we won't move in.
Yes.
So what they did is they put in penalties. So if you relet it within the first year, you get a £7,000 fine, and if you do it twice, it jumps up to like 40 odd thousand. So it makes it less appealing. However, maybe I shouldn't say this in case they change it, but £7,000 on an HMO or a certain property in certain areas is probably worth taking the hit.
Yes.
And to get your property back.
Yeah.
To get your property back. Yeah. So and you'll pay the fine, and then they get some tax. You haven't had a void or issue with. There's pros and cons, and it's a business relationship at the end of the day. And that's what I think the Labour government haven't really appreciated, is that this will affect and impact rents, because anything they do to tax the landlords more, to make it harder, is going to put rents up, because things like rent guarantee insurance will be added. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah,
the
tenants will pay.
The ability to, I just don't understand these notice periods.
Yeah,
because they don't actually make sense, a lot of them, especially with HMOs. Tenants are not going to give me 4 months notice to move out. They're going to give me the same amount of notice they've always given me, which sometimes is a day, and we don't chase them for the rent, we just relet the room, right? Sometimes it's 2 months. Legally, it would be 2 months.
Yes.
Legally, it'd be 4 months. They give you 4 months notice.
Yeah.
No one moves into an HMO to stay there. I mean, if they do just 4 months, they can do, and then that's fine.
But generally, people, it's a transition in their life. They might like the idea of living with other people. They'll probably settle down, have their own home, buy somewhere, travel, whatever it might be. And so that community that stays in HMOs, particularly the ones we're talking about, that end of the market, the higher end of the market, they're literally almost moving in and serving notice as well. But I've got to move out again in a few months. That doesn't work, because it makes no sense.
No, and it also creates this kind of pseudo service accommodation market, which by accident could put you in breach of your mortgage terms.
Yes.
Could put you in breach of planning.
Yes. Because occupants are short term as opposed to a 6 month tenancy.
Yeah, you could have everyone on 2 months terms. You could have people moving in, giving notice on the same day, move out 2 months later.
Yes.
That then creates a problem.
Yes.
Because especially
the use has changed.
Your use class could have changed, especially if they introduce a new use class for service accommodation, which they've done in Wales and they've talked about doing in England. So it becomes a problem. So there are unintended consequences of this. But I think with the type of HMOs we do, with the co-living, I think people will just do what they've always done, which is move in, stay as long as they're going to. Yes. And it's our job to keep them long term. And we understand our market, we understand our tenants. Average tenancy of, let's say, 18 to 24 months. That's not going to change because they can leave early.
Yes.
They're going to stay. Yeah. And I think there will be parts of the market that will see it. But I think there's also a lot of hullabaloo about nothing in certain ways. I think a lot of it is more about the fact that the rights are being taken away from landlords, and landlords will then be, on the surface, less incentivized. They're just going to not want to be in the industry because it becomes more like hard work. So that's just going to reduce the number of rooms, the number of properties available for rent, and market forces will put rents up. And if all of a sudden we get rent caps, game over.
Yes.
You may as well just push everyone out on the street.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact stats, but it's like most landlords have like 2 properties or something like that. And so each landlord you're losing a couple of lets typically as well. And some of the larger portfolio landlords are leaving as well, because they're thinking, I've had a good time, it's great, time to leave now, call it a day, and cash in the chips as it were. But there's a lot of people kind of not quite sure what to do as well. What would be your thoughts? People are, say, fearful around Section 21 and things, and thinking maybe it's time to get out. What's your thoughts and advice to landlords who are fearful of the change?
I think the landlords that are going to thrive are the ones that see the change and see the opportunity.
Yes.
And I think it's the ones that can pivot to coin a pandemic term, the ones that can pivot and go, well, I know that my buy-to-let properties, I've got a house here, I've got a flat there, these are not really working for me anymore, I'm going to sell those. I'm going to pivot into the strategies that are working really well.
Yes.
And the interesting thing about HMOs is that they're not really recognised in any of the legislation at the moment as being a solution to the housing crisis. However, they are one of the fundamental solutions to the housing crisis, because you can create accommodation for people to live in really rapidly, because you can take an underutilised house, office building, whatever it is, and make 20 rooms, 40 rooms. And we're not talking rabbit hutches here. If we go quality, and we can assess quality through planning permissions, through licensing standards are really low.
Yes, and sometimes people aim to say, my room has met the requirements. I say, that's the minimum requirements. That should not be your target.
Exactly, because they can, as I said earlier, they can shift the goalposts. And I think it's fascinating that people still have that approach. And those types of people are the ones that will go, because they haven't future-proofed their assets. So if you future-proof your assets and you have scope, you can pivot with the changes, and you go with the flow as opposed to against it.
Yes.
And sometimes you feel like you're going against the flow with public opinion, especially around what an HMO actually is and who lives in an HMO. Because I think there are some misconceptions and perceptions from the general public about what an HMO is.
Yes.
This is why I just don't like using the term.
Negative association with the term, yes.
Exactly. I even tried to remove the word HMO from planning applications that we do. We generally fail miserably, because the planning officers say, well, it's an HMO. It's like, yeah, but it's not an. Look at the type we're doing. This application versus this one, they're like night and day. So we like to try and, we're increasing the perception of accommodation. And one of the good things about the new government coming in is that there's a lot of younger people in there. Some of these Labour MPs might be renting. They could even be renting in an HMO. Some of them are of that age where they might be.
Or they have been recently.
Or they've been very, very recently. And they understand the plight of the tenant. That's why they're in this situation. And they've been elected. So if we can get the message through to them that landlords, that we're not all that bad, and we want to help the problem, we are part of the solution, not part of the problem, that actually then we can get that message across. We might be able to get some help to get changes which incentivize certain types of property development, certain types of tenure of property. So go work with them and just guide them, because to be fair, they don't know what they're doing.
Yes.
They've been out of power for, was it 14 years?
A long time.
A long time. And so no one really in government, there's a couple of older people know, but most people coming in don't know what they're doing. So we need to educate them what the problems are so that they can go and explore the solutions.
It's really, I think we're facing some really interesting times. I think there are some challenges, and I completely agree with you. You have to look for the opportunities. Even if you look back in the last 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, there's been constant change in the rental market. There's been constant ways of squeezing the landlord, but we're still here. We're still kind of adapt, and it might be slightly shrinking community of landlords. But actually, as you said, if they squeeze so much that it's no longer commercially viable, then people would walk away, because at the end of the day, it's a business. And if it doesn't make commercial sense, you're creating a product. Yes, you want to create a nice product, you want to create a nice environment, nice homes, and it needs to make some money as well, because the risks and the commercial risks you're taking to create this. If those benefits aren't there, then why would you do it? It will make no sense.
Go do something else.
Yeah, and if all these landlords start leaving, then who's going to provide the accommodation? Well, the government's not creating anymore. They keep going on about it. We're going to create 1 million new homes, but when? How's that going to happen? Where's it going to happen? So it really seems we're in with strange but interesting times.
Well, I was at the Future Development Conference just last week, and a lot of the conversation about legislation and the changes that are looking to come in was around the fact that there seems to be a realization from government that the private sector is not going to do any more than it's already doing.
Yes.
Because it is very reliably delivering the number of homes that it does every year, and that you can't suddenly go and build 1 million homes in one go, because there's not enough people to buy 1 million homes. You can't just have home ownership. There has to be a variety of tenures. There needs to be homes that are designed to be sold, homes which are designed to be rented. The PRS sector is a big one that will grow. And and the government needs to help fund or develop and deliver that social housing side, which is needed. So the private sector are going to continue doing what they're doing, and the SME developer, that we would be part of that, needs to be recognised as part of the solution. And the government, if they want to fill that shortfall, they've got to do that work. They've got to put something in place, funding in place, grants, anything, which because the private developer can build them if there's the funds there and there's an exit strategy for those particular units, because the private developer's not going to sell them.
And if it's a supportive environment that the government's created, but without that, that's not going to happen.
So the future is still to come. We don't know where it's going to go.
Matt, this has been a really interesting conversation, especially around my favourite topic, shared accommodation. I nearly said HMOs, shared accommodation.
So, I mean, they're an HMO at the end of the day.
Yes, they are. What's the best way for people to reach out to you and connect to you if they want to find you? Okay, well, if you want to find me on social media, at Clearly Matt Baker is all of my social media handles. Clearly Matt Baker. Clearly Matt Baker. Yeah, and we'll put the links in the description as well. And if you want to see what we do, then hop onto our website, 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗠𝗲𝗀𝗋.co.uk, and on the website it will show you what our upcoming strategies are, how people can get involved in that, and what the benefits are to them as well. Yeah, so the website's kept up to date, whatever you're doing right now. It's kind of, they can find that on the homepage, and links to other social media as well. Yeah, join our mailing list and go to the HMO platforms social media as well. Excellent. We'll put those links on the screen and also on the description as well. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated. Thank you. Cheers, Sach.